In the heart of Tennessee, where the rolling hills and country music intertwine, a dark tale of jealousy, deception, and the lure of fame unfolded. It was a story that would haunt the lives of two young women, forever intertwined by a twisted fate. Sarah, a petite brunette with piercing green eyes and a warm smile, had been Taylor Swift's best friend since childhood. They had grown up together in the small town of Hendersonville, their bond as strong as the roots of the ancient oak trees that dotted the landscape. As the years passed, Taylor's talent blossomed, and her dreams of becoming a country music superstar began to take shape. Sarah, with her long, slender legs and porcelain skin, had always been the more outgoing of the two, but as Taylor's star began to rise, a subtle change came over her. At first, Sarah was thrilled for her friend's success. She attended every concert, sang along to every song, and beamed with pride whenever Taylor's name was mentioned. But as the accolades poured in and the money rolled in, Sarah couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Sarah had always been a devout Christian, attending church every Sunday with her family and praying fervently for God's guidance. But as the green-eyed monster of envy took hold, her faith began to waver. It was then that Sarah stumbled upon a dark secret, a hidden world of Satanism that promised fame, fortune, and power. It all started one night as she was scrolling through social media, mindlessly liking and commenting on Taylor's latest posts. With each new photo of her friend living her dream life, Sarah felt a twinge of jealousy that slowly morphed into an all-consuming resentment. "It's just not fair," she muttered under her breath, tossing her phone aside in frustration. "Taylor has everything: the money, the fame, the adoring fans. What about me? When is it my turn?" Sarah tried to push the negative thoughts away, reminding herself that Taylor was her best friend, her sister. They had promised to support each other no matter what. But as the days passed, the jealousy only grew stronger, eating away at her like a cancer. One night, as Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling, a strange thought crept into her mind. What if there was a way to get the life she deserved? A way to finally step out of Taylor's shadow and into the spotlight? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, and Sarah found herself unable to shake it. Sarah's descent into the world of Satanism began innocently enough. She had always been fascinated by the occult, reading books on witchcraft and tarot cards in secret. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon a website dedicated to Satanism that her interest truly piqued. The website promised that by making a pact with the devil, one could achieve anything they desired: wealth, power, fame. Sarah scoffed at the idea at first, dismissing it as nothing more than a silly fantasy. But as she continued to scroll through the site, reading testimonials from people who claimed to have achieved their wildest dreams through satanic rituals, something began to shift within her. Sarah found herself drawn to the idea of making a pact with the devil. The thought of having the power to achieve everything she had ever wanted, to finally step out of Taylor's shadow and into the spotlight, was intoxicating. She began to spend hours researching Satanism, reading book after book on the history and practices of the dark religion. One night, Sarah made a decision. She would attend a satanic ritual just to see what it was all about. She told herself that she was only going for research purposes, that she had no intention of actually participating in the rituals. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. Sarah began to attend secret meetings in the woods where she would join a small group of fellow seekers in chanting and praying to dark forces. At first, she felt like an outsider, a fraud among true believers. But as the weeks turned into months, and she continued to attend the rituals, something began to change within her. She could feel the darkness growing inside her, consuming her thoughts and her actions. Gone was the sweet, innocent Sarah that Taylor had grown up with. In her place was a woman consumed by jealousy and ambition, willing to do whatever it took to achieve the fame and fortune that her friend had so effortlessly attained. Sarah began to wear a mask of friendship and support, fooling everyone around her into thinking that she was still the same old Sarah. But deep down, her heart was slowly being eaten away by the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. As the months passed, Sarah's obsession with Satanism only grew stronger. She began to attend more and more rituals, spending hours chanting and praying to dark forces. She begged them to grant her the fame and fortune that Taylor had achieved, to give her the power to finally step out of her friend's shadow. And as Sarah's devotion to Satanism deepened, so too did the darkness that consumed her. She began to neglect her other relationships, pushing away friends and family who tried to intervene. She became paranoid and suspicious, convinced that everyone was out to get her. But through it all, Sarah maintained her mask of friendship and support. She continued to attend Taylor's concerts, cheering her on from the sidelines. She smiled and laughed and pretended that everything was fine, even as her heart was slowly being ripped apart by the jealousy and resentment that consumed her. As Taylor's fame continued to grow, Sarah's desperation reached a fever pitch. She knew that she had to take drastic action if she wanted to achieve the success that she craved. One night, under the light of a full moon, Sarah gathered the necessary ingredients for a twisted ritual: a lock of Taylor's hair, a vial of her own blood, and a pact written in her own hand. As she chanted the words, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement, the air around her crackled with energy. The ritual was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. As she spoke the ancient words, she could feel the power coursing through her veins, a dark energy that threatened to consume her very being. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the sound of Sarah's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room, and Sarah felt a strange sensation wash over her. It was as if she was being pulled in two different directions, her body and mind being torn apart by the forces of darkness. The pain was excruciating, a searing agony that threatened to rip her apart from the inside out. When the light faded, Sarah looked around, her eyes wild and unfocused. She felt different, changed, as if a part of her had been reborn. And as she looked in the mirror, she gasped in shock. For staring back at her was the face of Taylor Swift, her long blonde hair and piercing blue eyes unmistakable. Sarah spent the next few weeks in a daze, her mind reeling from the events of that fateful night. But as she stepped out into the world, she found that everything had changed. People treated her with a reverence and respect that she had never known before, bowing and scraping before her as if she were royalty. Suddenly, doors that had once been closed to her were flung wide open. She was invited to the most exclusive parties, rubbing elbows with the rich and famous. Paparazzi followed her every move, snapping photos and clamoring for interviews. And wherever she went, people showered her with adoration, desperate to catch a glimpse of the famous Taylor Swift. Sarah reveled in her newfound fame, basking in the attention and adoration of the crowds. She attended Taylor's concerts, posing as her long-lost sister, and was greeted with thunderous applause wherever she went. She spent Taylor's money freely, buying expensive clothes and jewelry, and living a life of luxury that she had only ever dreamed of. But as the days turned into weeks, Sarah's grip on reality began to slip. She became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone would discover her secret and expose her for the fraud that she was. She lashed out at those around her, including Taylor, who she saw as a threat to her newfound fame and fortune. Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic and unstable. She would fly into fits of rage at the slightest provocation, lashing out at those who dared to question her or challenge her authority. She became obsessed with maintaining her image, spending hours in front of the mirror, carefully applying her makeup and styling her hair to perfection. And as Sarah's mental state deteriorated, so too did her relationships with those around her. She pushed away friends and family who tried to intervene, convinced that they were jealous of her success and wanted to bring her down. She became increasingly isolated, surrounded only by those who were willing to stroke her ego and feed her delusions. But despite her outward success, Sarah was haunted by a deep sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction. She had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of, but it wasn't enough. The fame, the fortune, the adoration of the masses, it all felt hollow and meaningless, without the love and acceptance of those who truly mattered. And as Sarah's grip on reality continued to slip, she found herself spiraling deeper and deeper into a world of delusion and despair. She became convinced that she was the real Taylor Swift, that her friend was an imposter who had stolen her identity. And as her paranoia grew, she became increasingly dangerous, lashing out at anyone who dared to challenge her twisted reality. One night, as Sarah was leaving a concert, she was struck by a car, her body thrown into the air like a rag doll. The impact was deafening, the sound of crunching metal and shattering glass piercing the night air. Sarah felt a searing pain shoot through her body as she hit the ground with a sickening thud, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles. As she lay there, struggling to breathe, Sarah's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The satanic rituals, the chanting, the promises of fame and fortune. It had all been for nothing. She had sacrificed everything, her friendships, her morals, her very soul. And for what? A twisted delusion that had consumed her every waking moment. Sarah could feel her life slipping away, the darkness closing in around her. And in that moment, as she lay there on the cold, hard ground, she realized the truth, that her fame, her fortune, and her twisted reality had all been a lie. The adoring fans, the lavish lifestyle, the accolades. It had all been a figment of her imagination, a delusion fueled by her own jealousy and ambition. As the world around her faded to black, Sarah felt a strange sense of clarity wash over her. She had been so consumed by her own desires, so blinded by the promise of power and success, that she had lost sight of what truly mattered. Her friendship with Taylor, the bond they had shared since childhood. It had been the most precious thing in her life, and she had thrown it all away in a desperate bid for fame. Sarah died alone, her body broken and her mind shattered by the weight of her own delusions. And as the world mourned the loss of Taylor Swift's secret sister, the truth of her twisted fate remained hidden, a dark secret that would haunt the town of Hendersonville for years to come. But the truth was, Sarah had been lost long before that fateful night. She had been consumed by the darkness, by the promise of fame and fortune that Satanism had offered her. And in the end, it had cost her everything, her life, her sanity, and the friendship that had once meant the world to her. For in the end, Sarah's story was not just a tale of tragedy and loss, but a reminder of the power of friendship, of staying true to oneself in the face of temptation. It was a story that would echo through the ages, a dark reminder of the consequences of giving in to the darkness that lurks within us all.